Hey guys, how's it going? So the other day I went out to the range and did a little experiment that I thought was interesting and hope you guys do too. So this is a 9mm cartridge. Regular old 9mm, 9x19 9mm Luger. This is a 357 SIG. And for those of you that aren't familiar, basically what a 357 SIG is this is a 40mm case. So they start off with a 40mm as its parent case. It is then necked down to accept a 9mm bullet or projectile. So a 10mm and 40 are basically the same size as far as the diameter of the case. So we're basically going from 10mm down to 9mm. And we can see here that the case is substantially necked down. It starts off much fatter and then it gets smaller to accommodate the smaller bullet. So what we have here is basically a smaller projectile coming out of a bigger case that has more powder capacity, so we can send this 9mm projectile out at generally much greater speeds than a standard 9x19. Now, besides the case being bigger as far as wider in diameter, we're also going to notice, I'm going to line the bottoms of these up pretty evenly for you here. We're going to notice the case is much longer on the 357 SIG than it is the 9mm. You can see that basically about to the point where it starts necking itself down on this 40 case is about where it ends on the 9mm. So here's the difference. Much larger diameter case, especially when it gets down to the case head portion and much of the wall. And we also have a much longer case. So here's what I have been wondering. Is it possible to shoot 9mm 9x19 out of a gun that's chambered in 357 SIG? So I took my Glock 22. This is a Gen 2 Glock 22. Now, this gun's normally chambered in 40, but for those of you Glock guys, I'm sure you already know this. If not for the newer guys, Glocks are kind of cool in that they're somewhat modular, meaning you can have a Glock 22, which is a 40 caliber gun, and without really doing any changes at all to the gun, you can simply put in a Glock 31 barrel. Now, Glock 31 is the model number of the 357 SIG chamber Glocks. So I simply put a 357 SIG barrel in my Glock 22. So for all intents and purposes of this test, this is basically a Glock 31. And the other cool thing about doing the caliber conversion from a 40 to a 357 SIG is you can still use the regular old 40 caliber magazines. There's actually no difference at all in how the mags are designed, both internally or externally. Same mags from Glock. So 357 SIG. So yeah, this is technically a Glock 22, but we can call it a Glock 31 for all intents and purposes. The point is, this gun's chambered in 357. Now I also have a 9mm conversion barrel for this gun that I sometimes shoot, and the original 40 barrel. I just want you guys to make a note here, because when I'm shooting, it doesn't quite focus in on the letters. But note that the 357 SIG barrel here, that's clearly marked 357 31 for the Glock 31 stainless steel, is, you know, a stainless raw steel color, and my 9mm barrel from Lone Wolf is a black finish. So you can see pretty clearly when you watch the video I'm about to show you that I am indeed shooting this 9mm Luger out of a 357 SIG. And the bullet I chose to shoot is basically just 115 grain federal, but this is their range ammunition that they call the 115 grain TSJ. So it's basically just a special polymer type coating, otherwise known as their Syntec line. Decided I would shoot this out of here just in case it gets stuck in the barrel, right? Because you never know. This is definitely not the correct caliber to be shooting out of this barrel or gun, and who knows what would happen. So I thought I'll try this out. This bullet might have a little more lubricity to it than a copper jacketed. Alright, without further ado, I'm going to take you out to the range with me, and we can see what happens when you shoot 9mm Luger out of a 357 SIG chambered gun. Alright, so I've got my Glock 22, and it currently has a 357 SIG barrel in it. And what I'm curious is, can you fire a 9mm out of a 357 SIG? So this is a Federal Syntec 9mm 115 grain brass case. First, I'm going to shoot 3 rounds of 125 grain 357 SIG just to make sure the gun's working good. Then we're going to try the 9mm. Alright. Three rounds function just fine. Now I'm going to see if this 9mm will feed from this Glock 22 mag that was just firing 357 SIG. And again, this still has the 357 SIG barrel in it. Alright, chamber just fine. Hey, not only did it go off the barrel, but I saw the bullet go just off to the side of my target. It was actually going slow enough where I could kind of sort of see the bullet in the air, but I would note it even held open the slide on the last round. So 9mm, no problem. Just checking to make sure that I don't have a squib load, and I do not. I definitely saw the actual bullet coming out as it was hitting the target, which is only about 7 yards away, so that's kind of crazy. Alright, I'm going to see if I can get multiple rounds of the 9mm to feed from the 357 SIG barrel. Alright, no problem. They actually all fed with the slide locking open on the last round. And here's what the spec casing looks like. You can see this has been fire formed and knocked itself up to basically a 40 cal from 9mm. Kind of crazy, but the brass was able to expand enough to get enough pressure to actually send the round down range. No squib loads. Kind of cool, actually. Alright, I'm back to do it one more time. Just for those of you that don't think it can be done, 9mm, 115 grain out of a Glock 22 40 cal mag, 357 SIG barrel. Feeding from the magazine. Alright, no problem. Even held the slide open once again, and a couple times I could see the trail of the bullet through the air. Alright, as you can see, no problems whatsoever, which is pretty freaking cool because there's a few things that could go wrong here. We're putting in a much shorter length case into a chamber that's supposed to accommodate a much longer case, right? We also have on the case head a substantial difference in size. See if the camera will catch this, but we're talking like quite a bit difference in the 357 SIG here versus the 9mm. So there could be extraction issues, could potentially be ejection issues, could have a stuck case, could have a squib load. All kinds of things could have happened, but it didn't, which kind of shows you the reliability of the good old Glocks. Hey, they don't have to be your favorite gun, and they're not even my favorite gun, to be quite honest. However, what a reliable platform that you can put such a wide range of ammo in it, including a much more underpowered cartridge, wrong case size, wrong case length, wrong, head diameter. A lot of things are wrong here. In fact, the only thing these have in common is the actual projectiles are 9mm. The gun fed it like nothing, no squib load whatsoever, and the slide even held open every single time on the last round, as you guys just saw. Now look, it wasn't very accurate, okay? I could almost see, not the exact bullet, but I could see the trail of the bullet going through the air as it was missing the steel plate. I was able to luckily connect to it a couple times there, but part of it is due to the fact that basically the bullet was freeboarding for a minute there because it wasn't immediately engaging in the lands and grooves with how much shorter the case is. So obviously this is going to lead to inaccuracy. The other thing is this. I wanted to keep it more of a stock, type setup here. I already had a little bit of additional weight, which isn't much with this, little cocking ledge here, the muzzle nut, but I did take my optic off because I thought, well, that's not really going to be a fair test to keep all that extra weight on here and then fire a round that's much more anemic than what this gun's designed to shoot. So I was shooting it with no optic, basically just line of sight. There's nothing on the back here for me to line up, so that may have been part of the reason why I was having a hard time hitting the target. But yeah, I'm not recommending that you guys do this. You guys can decide whether you want to or not. For fun at the range, I'm going to certainly tell you right now, look, don't run around with 9mm in your 357 SIG for any type of personal protection, because these rounds were coming out of here slow. And when I say slow, I'm not talking 45 ACP slow, probably even sub 455 Webley slow. So when I say slow, I mean slow. Would I stand in front of one? No. Was I still being safe when I was shooting? Absolutely. But I don't think you could necessarily rely on this having any kind of stopping power if you needed it to protect yourself. But just for fun on the range, I thought this was a neat little experiment. And for the purposes of what I was trying to find out, this old girl passed it with flying colors. This is a Gen 2 Glock, and it just shows you the tolerances that these guns have. That the extractor was able to still grab on, pull it out, everything. Let's just say, to say the least, I was impressed, especially with the slide holding open on an empty mag. Now the brass. This is what you guys have been probably wanting to see. So 9mm. This is the 9mm brass after it's been shot out of a 9mm chambered gun. We're going to see it's nice and consistent. Everything's nice and round. No visible bulges on the case. Just looks like regular range brass, right? So that's the baseline. Now, here is a 357 SIG brass. And you can see the same thing. It still retains its bottleneck, if you will, where they taper it down to 9mm. And this is kind of typical of what a 357 SIG brass would look like, right? Now, here's the 9mm brass fired out of the 357 SIG chamber. I've got two of them here that I picked up off the ground. And we're going to instantly notice there's something kind of weird going on here. Basically, it started to, and not like in a direct spot here, it's kind of a little wavy, but it basically fire formed the 9mm brass up to 40 caliber or 10mm size brass. It fire formed it all the way up. It was able to actually seal to get enough pressure to send the bullet downrange, but it didn't do it completely evenly. I don't know if you guys can see this from your vantage point, but it's kind of like off kilter. The top of it is kind of like diagonal, if you will. Really weird. I've never obviously seen a case come out like this. Here's another angle. See how it looks like the top of it's tapered? Like it's actually a little higher on this side than it is this side over here. Yeah, that's not trick photography. It's literally sloping at a downward angle. So it just knocked itself up. Obviously sealed. I did not notice any excess gas coming back out of the back of the gun or anything like that. We'll notice that the head, where the extraction groove is still pretty much intact. I don't notice any deformation back here on this part. I would note though that where the firing pin, or you could call it the striker in a Glock, it's fine either way, you can see where that contact to the primers, it's rather deep and abrupt. So this definitely held on for a split second. I don't know if you guys can pick that up, but it's kind of a jagged, longer, rectangular hole. We could maybe call this primer smear on steroids, or primer gouging more like. Where you can see on the 357 case, and this is out of the same gun, shot right around the same time that I shot the 9mm. We can see that, yeah, you know, the Glock punches a decent little, you know, imprint into the primer, but much more subdued than than when it's with the 9mm. Like, I'm almost surprised on this one that I can't actually see through into the inside of the case. It's that deep. And maybe the camera isn't doing it justice, but it struck at least twice as deep as it did on the 357 SIG case. So, yeah. And just for some fun, guys, I'm going to throw in a little more bonus footage of me shooting some 357 SIG out of the 357 SIG chamber Glock. Glock 22, chambered in 357 SIG. Alright, no problems. Alright guys, so in conclusion, yes, a Glock chambered in 357 SIG, at least my particular one, will shoot 9mm out of a 357 SIG chambering. And as you can see, it also shoots 357 SIG just fine too. This round may not be as common, you know, as some of the other rounds, but don't underestimate this little round. This is a very, very, very good ammo. I would definitely trust my life with it. Now in this case, this is just a range ammo flat point, but with a nice defensive loading, this stuff screams. I mean, it's nothing to get 1400, even 1500 for standard weight for caliber out of the 357 SIG. You know, 1500 foot per second, I should say. You can actually exceed that by quite a bit by using light for caliber rounds, custom loadings, etc. So I kind of look at this as almost like the big bore Tokarev round. A little bottleneck screaming round with an extra case capacity. But yeah, this is a really, really good round. And with obviously 40 not being as popular as it used to be, which by the way, 40 is still a great cartridge. I don't advocate that it go away like some people do. Great cartridge. Well, this being based off of the parent case of the 40, it seems like 357 SIG has been kind of going by the wayside a little bit too lately, which is a shame because these are both great, fabulous rounds. If you have guns like a Glock and even some of the Smith & Wessons, you can take a gun like this and easily go from 357 SIG to 40 to 9mm. And in the case of 40 and 357, you don't have to change anything on it, not even the mag. So great little round, guys. Couldn't recommend it more if you're looking to try a new round out, the 357 SIG. And apparently these Glocks are so reliable and set up with such good tolerances that even this little guy, the old 9mm Luger, will still get it out of the barrel. Alright, hopefully you guys enjoyed this little experiment. I haven't seen any other YouTube videos on it. They might be out there, but I couldn't find any when I was looking it up. So I said, well, you know what? If no one else is going to give me the info I want, I guess I'm just going to have to do it myself. And hopefully if you guys were always wondering, you got the answer to your question. Alright, thanks for watching, and have a good one. I just found that round that was jammed up in the Taurus mag. Let's throw another 9mm. Just help me clean up the range a little bit.